Hey everybody, it's Kneecap here, and in this video we're going to be talking about Templar Strikes versus Crusader Strikes, Crusading Strikes, which one you should be using, the difference between them, why you might see somebody using the opposite one of you, even if you're having success with the one that you're using. So it's worth pointing out just at the top of the video that both of these talents are actually quite good. They do change the way you play slightly, the way you gear slightly, depending on which one you pick, and we're going to talk about the differences there. Let's go ahead and start with Templar Strikes. Templar Strikes is what I suggested that you use in my guide, and certainly at the beginning of the patch, before we had all this gear a few weeks later, this was definitely the choice for most people. But Crusader Strike was also, a contender even at the beginning of the patch. Now, what makes Templar Strikes good, of course, is that it basically gives you a button to always press, which then allows you to play with low haste. Haste is not as much as a priority when you have this button to press, and then you can put stats into other things. In this case, versatility, as that's like our best stat because mastery doesn't scale very well anymore for Ret. And like I said, this kind of devalues haste because you always have a button to press. Essentially, there could be a small time on a very rare occasion that you don't, but you will almost always have a button to press with Templar Strikes. And so, like I said, it kind of devalues haste in that way. A little bit. It doesn't like completely ruin it, but it like devalues it a little bit, right? So it basically allows you to play like this full-on verse build. You can throw crit in with it as well. You get to play like this huge verse build, and that's very powerful. There's very good benefits to playing verse build. Now, there are also negatives to that, because like I said, that means that your other stats aren't scaling, which is not good for your long-term health of your spec, right? We shouldn't be necessarily happy that verse is good. We should kind of want our mastery, for example. Mastery has, historically been very good for Paladins. Having that be good again would not be a bad thing to happen, to like have that scale very well again. But like I said, this allows you to kind of go with a full verse build. Now in raids, especially progression raiding, this is very good. This also not only does verse increase your damage, it increases or decreases your damage taken as well. So you have more survivability. This also can be helpful in high keys too, just having more survivability. However, there is another side of that coin where if you have actually the most optimal gear, you could have like haste verse on every piece and still have super high verse and then play the Crusading Strikes auto attack build instead while having that. Now, that gear optimization might not have been available before, or it might be hard to get that gear optimization. But once you have that gear optimization, especially, it becomes a real debate on which one you want to take, because the Crusading Strikes will do it with the correct gear optimization. Crusading Strikes auto attack will do actually a little bit more damage. It's not a lot more damage, but it is a little bit more damage. Now, you do have to feed into haste extra for that. Just having haste first gear might not be enough. You might need to enchant your rings with haste. You might need to gem haste as your main, your high stat on the gems. So it'd be like haste verse, for example, or it might have you gem haste crit because your crit's so low because you're running as much haste first gear as you can. But because it's going to prioritize haste so much, why? Because that's going to give you more auto attacks. It's going to give this more. This ability is going to happen more. When you have a trinket like Pocket Anvil, for example, that helps that as well, and it kind of expounds on itself there. So to end up Templar Strikes just allows you to play a really clean build, to stack verse extremely high, have very high survival, and still be pretty powerful. You're not going to scale that great, but you're still pretty powerful. The benefits of Crusading Strikes, like I said, are, one, you get to play with haste, which is kind of fun. Sometimes just having more haste is fun to play with, if you prefer to play with it. And you get to optimize your gear in that way. Like I said, kind of stacking haste. And if you simulate your character with Crusading Strikes on, you'll notice that it's telling you need to have more haste, you need to have more haste, you need to have more haste, because it is actually scaling. And it's pretty much only that ability. Now, there are like different breakpoints where you could potentially fit more globals into your execution sentence and stuff, right? That's going to increase your damage too. So it's not only Crusading Strikes, but it is, a big part of it. Now you also have to change up your talents a little bit. You're going to want to run Zealot's Fervor with your auto attack speed, for example, when you're running Crusading Strikes, but it ends up not being a big deal. And like I said, if you do optimize your gear better, Crusading Strikes could be, and likely will be for you, the actual higher damage done. Now, again, not by a lot. If I, for example, for me, I do not have the most optimized gear to run Crusading Strike auto attack, but if I completely did what I could with my gear, changed all my gems and enchants and stuff like that, it would be a couple hundred DPS increase for me to run Crusading Strikes. Now, I would also lose a decent amount of survivability with my versatility being a bit lower than what it is now, a few percent low. So my haste, essentially goes up by doing that. My versatility goes down because the way I'm getting it with my gear is I have to kind of use enchants and gems to get there. So for me, I could gain a little bit of DPS by going Crusader Strike auto attack, but I would lose verse. And for me, it's not worth it. It's not a big enough number. If you're talking like maybe 500-700, and then definitely if 1,000, definitely, but like 500-700 DPS, then maybe I would give up a little bit of survivability. Again, you're not giving up all of it because you could still have verse on your gear as well. Like I said, haste verse gear would be optimal there, and so you're not giving up all your survival. You're just giving up a little bit of survival. And so it's really up to you on which play style you want to play with. And when you look at top logs, you'll see some people running Crusading Strike auto attack because it is just that little bit more damage for them. And maybe they have the gear where it optimally gives them 500, 700, 1,000 more DPS to run it. And then on top Mythic Plus players, you'll see some of them playing with Crusading Strike auto attack as well. I imagine this is probably just free up keybinds because in Mythic Plus, you're going to be using things like Cleanse and Bop and Sack and just pretty much all your abilities. Blinding Light, you might take Repentance. You have all these kinds of buttons you might need to use in Mythic Plus, and that's why I kind of feel like it was being played even before people were actually optimizing their gear for it. But now with the gear optimization, it also makes sense too. Again, you can do just a little bit more damage. Now this is mostly single target talking here, but not completely, because you in a AoE build you do cleave as well with your Crusader Strike. So it's not completely a single target thing, but it can be largely that. But yeah, it's definitely a play style choice, and that's the thing you get into with things like this is you'll have the camps yelling at each other. So the very strong stingent raid camp, who generally dominate, I think, kind of the Ret Paladin discourse, including myself in some ways, will probably be like, no, just take Templar Strikes. It's safer. It's easier. Don't have to worry about swing timers, things like that, right? And that stuff's kind of true. But then in the Crusader Strike auto attack, people will say, well, this is a different playstyle. I get to stack haste. It's slightly more damage, and all of those things are true too. Like, both sides are true. And really, as a Ret Paladin, you just have to decide what kind of playstyle you want unless one of them becomes so much better. Like maybe next patch, when even more haste is available to us, maybe for everybody, Crusading Strikes is 1,000 DPS more. And then that just becomes what we run naturally, right? And there was not going to even be a debate at that point. And that, that could be the case as more haste becomes available and people are running like ridiculous amounts of haste. That could be the case. But as of right now, it's definitely just more of a playstyle choice. You're going to see on raid logs, you're going to see top rets with both of these talents. With Templar Strikes, you're going to see top rets on logs with Crusading Strikes. And then in Mythic Plus, you're going to see rets doing top damage in a Mythic Plus dungeon, however many 100Ks that the absolute top players are doing with Templar Strikes, and you'll probably see it with Crusading Strikes as well. It is mostly a playstyle choice, and I just wanted to get that information out there because I was messing around with Crusading Strikes the other day, so obviously there's a reason for this video, right? I was messing around with Crusading Strikes the other day, trying to see if I optimized my gear, how much damage I could get out of it. And like I said, for me, it was only a couple hundred damage that I was going to get out of it. And so it wasn't really worth it for me to resocket everything, re-enchant everything, really maybe try to go back into some dungeons and find some haste verse gear. It really wasn't worth that for me to just gain a couple hundred DPS. Like I said, if that was a higher number, then I probably definitely would do that, though. And we could possibly see a higher number for all players as they get in. But there are some rets, that, like I said, who have that optimal gear, who have lots of haste verse pieces, and that becomes a whole nother story as far as, for them, it becomes maybe an obvious choice to just choose Crusading Strikes. So just want to do a video talking about this a little bit. The main thing I wanted to get a point across is it is just a playstyle choice at this point. One is slightly more damage, one is slightly more survivability, but they're very close. Playstyle matters a lot to you. If you want to have that control of the Templar Strikes, or if you want to have that extra keybind with the Crusading Strikes, again, those are just two different play styles right there. And until one of them is just naturally doing much more damage than the other, and by naturally I mean not having to like have a completely different set of gear, just like naturally one of them's doing more than the other, until that point, which could be next patch, until that point I would say you know, just go with the playstyle that you enjoy. And I'll revisit again in the whenever patch 10.2 comes out and I do the patch 10.2 guide. I'll revisit it again because I might have a different answer, and that answer could be Crusading Strikes, for example, right? So that's it for this one. As always, I do ask you to please subscribe to the channel because it helps me out a lot. And other than that, everybody have a good one.